This technique that I'm about to show you is literally one of the simplest and most powerful ways to make predictions for your year ahead. Learning this technique has completely changed the way that I make predictions, and it's also changed the way that I teach astrology to my students. My readings have gotten much easier to prepare for, and my predictions have gotten way more precise as a result of learning Annual Profections. And the best part is, you can use this technique to map out your entire year ahead, even if you have no prior knowledge of astrology. And if you're more advanced with your studies, you can get as deep and as nuanced as you want with it. So essentially, the idea behind Annual Profections is that the entire birth chart does not remain equally active throughout your lifetime. There are different periods in your life where different houses, different planets, different areas of the chart become more potent, more sensitive, more activated. It's essentially where more stuff is happening there. And so this is an ancient timing technique rooted in Hellenistic astrological tradition, where one house in your birth chart, along with its ruling planet, is activated through each year of your life. And the house that's activated is the same for that year for every single person across the board. And so what this looks like in practice is, from the time of your birth, from age 0 to 1, your first house is activated. Then from age 1 to 2, your second house is activated. From age 2 to 3, your third house is activated. From 3 to 4, your fourth house is activated. And that activation continues to go in the same rotation in zodiacal order over and over and over again throughout your entire life. And so what you might be thinking here is, if everyone has the same house activated at age 36, age 40, age 70, etc., why aren't we all sharing the exact same experiences when we reach those milestones? The answer to that is pretty simple. We all have different birth charts. They're laid out very differently, and we all have different signs that are occupying each house in our birth chart, different planets that might be residing there, and we also have different planetary rulers for each of those houses as well. And those rulers tell their own specific story that, again, becomes very activated at the time of that perfected year. And so in order to understand fully what the heck is going on, what themes are activated in our birth chart year to year, we have to really understand the natal chart and the natal story, so that way we know which themes, which parts of our lives, which experiences might be coming online during that 1 year period, which always begins with the solar return. And so it's not the year to year, like 2025, 2026, 2027. It's literally our age, and the activation for Annual Profections occurs at the exact moment of the solar return. That's why this technique combines really well with bigger picture timing techniques like solar returns and lunar returns and secondary progressions, transits, all of it. And that's why we teach it all together in the Cosmic Academy of Astrology. And I also do have a course that's available that teaches big picture timing techniques, where we combine solar returns, lunar returns, annual profections, and also monthly profections. And I'm going to link that down in the description below. And so because there are so many different layers to unravel when it comes to understanding annual profections and the different ways that you can utilize this technique to understand what's coming for your year ahead or somebody else's year ahead, I'm going to start with the first thing first, the very basics, the things that anybody can use and understand. And then I'm going to continue to build in complexity from there. But even if you are a beginner, I highly suggest that you should watch till the very end, because as we go through the different layers, I'm going to be providing different free resources and some paid resources if you want to go extra deep, that will help you to utilize each layer and deepen the way that you work with Annual Profections even more. And so after you go and you play with these other resources, after you play with the basics with Annual Profections and you want to dive deeper, when you come back to this video, you're going to have the foundation, you're going to have the understanding, and it's going to be so easy for you to start unpacking the additional layers and getting more detail for your yearly predictions. Before we move on to step 1, I just want to mention that this is a traditional Hellenistic astrology technique that's rooted in whole sign houses. And it does not work at all using quadrant house systems like Placidus or whatever else it is that you're using. And so you're going to want to make sure that for this technique specifically, you are only looking at whole sign houses. The second point I want to drive home is that we are only using the traditional visible planets, the traditional rulers of each sign in your birth chart. And so the traditional rulers are the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto have no relevance in this technique. And so you have to kind of erase that part from your memory where Scorpio is connected to Pluto, Neptune is connected to Pisces, Uranus is connected to Aquarius, and look at the technique through the lens of traditional astrology, which is what it was built on and built off of. And so these new additions to the astrological repertoire just don't apply when it comes to this technique. And just to give you a quick rundown in case you're more well-versed in modern Western astrology and you just don't have as much familiarity with the traditional rulerships, it goes in this order. So Aries is ruled by Mars, but Scorpio is also ruled by Mars. Taurus is ruled by Venus. Libra obviously is also ruled by Venus. We have Gemini being ruled by Mercury. Obviously Virgo is still ruled by Mercury in modern astrology and traditional astrology. Then we have Cancer being ruled by the moon, Leo being ruled by the sun. And then from there we have Sagittarius being ruled by Jupiter, as well as Pisces being ruled by Jupiter. And then Capricorn and Aquarius are both ruled by Saturn. Okay, so now that we have all that out of the way, let's get into the first step where we're looking at which house is activated for each year of life. And for you to unpack that, you really need to have an understanding of your own birth chart and your own natal placements. If you don't already have that, I highly recommend downloading my free Astrology 101 quick reference guide in the link down in the description below to start picking apart your birth chart and your placements so you can really work with the energy in this video. It'll also give you a reference on the significations of all of the houses, so that way when you're first house is activated versus your 7th house versus your 8th house, you know the main themes that are going to be coming up in your year ahead. And so as we mentioned before, every single year of your life has a different house in your birth chart that is associated with it. And so the first house is going to be activated from age 0 to 1. It's going to be activated again at age 12, 24, 36, and so on and so forth. The first house is connected to the self. It's connected to your identity. It's connected to your physical body. It's connected to your major life themes and life trajectory. The biggest energies and themes that are connected to your overall life story become activated during a first house year. This can be a year of reinventing yourself. This can be a year where everything in your life is subject to activation and change. This could be a year when your own will, your own volition, your own ambitions become more activated. It's when you become more self-involved and self-centered, but in a way that is necessary to further your goals. In Annual Profections, the second house is activated at age 1, 13, 25, 37, 49, 61, etc., and so on and so forth. And so during your second house year, second house themes, which involve money and material possessions and spending your resources, saving your resources, acquiring material things, that becomes more active. So money becomes a central focus of the second house year. In the third house year, which happens at age 2, 14, 26, 38, 50, 62, etc., this is going to be when third house themes become activated. And so for those who are not super familiar, the third house is the house of early education. It's the house of reading, writing, arithmetic. It's the house of smaller skill sets. It's the house of the day-to-day communications that you have and the methods through which you communicate with other people. It's the house of your community, your neighborhood, your immediate environment. It also rules vehicles, commutes, and short distance travel. But in traditional astrology, it's also rituals that are connected to your bigger, higher belief systems. It's the way that you practice your religion. It's the way that you practice your philosophy. It's the way that you pray. It's the way that you connect to something bigger than you on a day-to-day basis. It's your connection to those smaller signs, smaller synchronicities, smaller omens that come through in your everyday regular life. And so all of those topics become more amped up and more predominant during your third house year. The fourth house is activated at age 3, 15, 27, 39, 51, and 63, so on and so forth throughout your lifetime. Every 12 years, it becomes activated again. And so the fourth house activates fourth house themes, where there could be energies and influences connected to your parents, to your family, to your ancestry, to your roots that become become more important and predominant at that time. It could be that there are themes involving your literal home and property, maybe a move, maybe changes going on in your home. It's very much rooted in your foundations. The fifth house becomes activated at age 4, 16, 28, 40, etc., etc. And the fifth house is connected to children. And so there could be themes that come up involving your children, your ability to have children, your connection with your children. It could also be themes around hobbies, interests, things that you love to do, connecting with your passions. The fifth house is the house of joy. So this is usually a happier year unless you have something else going on in these other layers that we're going to be talking about soon. And so it's a time for you to play. It's a time for you to connect with the things that you love. It's a time for romance. It's a time to put yourself out there a little bit more. It's a time to take your creativity and put it out into the world in some way. And so I really like the fifth house years for the most part, for most people. And then we move on to the sixth house year. So the sixth house in traditional astrology is considered to be a malefic house. And so this can be, for some people, a more difficult year because the sixth house is connected to themes of illness, of disease, of servitude, of work and hard work and daily routines. The sixth house becomes activated at age 5, 17, 29, 41, 53, etc., and so on and so forth. And so this time period can be a time where we have to come to terms with something involving our health, our work, the way that we show up in service of other people, the obligations we have to help those around us, even if we don't necessarily want to. It's kind of a house where, yeah, we show up in service, and sometimes that can be by choice, especially if the sixth house is really pleasant for us. But for others, it can be like, I have these obligations to care for my family, to care for this other person, to do this thing. And if it can become a little bit more difficult and heavy of a responsibility to carry all of this during a sixth house year. It can also be a year where themes of like animals and pets and things like that can come up too. And so that can be a little happier for some people. The seventh house year is activated at age 6, 18, 30, 42, 54, 66, so on and so forth. And so the seventh house year is a big year for relationships. And that's especially big changes, big events, big milestones involving long-term committed partnership. And so that could be marriage, that could be really deep, really important romantic relationships with people, that could be, divorces and things like that, separations. But it also just involves one-to-one connections in general, legal types of pursuits or legal connections or agreements between two people are very seventh house. Even things like lawsuits can be a very seventh house topic and theme. It is the house of open enemies. And so when you know who your enemy is, they can become a more predominant person in your life during this time. But it could also just be one-to-one connections in general. It doesn't have to be romantic. It doesn't have to be the opposite of romantic. It's not just love and hate. It's anyone that you're close to and connected to where you have this mutual objective or goal. And then we have the eighth house here, which is another challenging, traditionally malefic or bad house that is activated at age 7, 19, 31, 43, 55, etc., and so on and so forth. And the eighth house brings about topics and themes related to literal death sometimes, just to kind of put that out there first. But also it could be fear and fear around death. There could be themes around endings and things that are a little bit darker, a little bit scarier, a little bit more difficult to deal with. The eighth house is also the house of anxiety and our deep-seated fears that are tied to past experiences that are not necessarily connected to the present moment, that hold power and control over us. Power and control issues can also be a big thing during eighth house years, as can topics involving money and resources, especially in connection with other people. So like if you're in debt or you have joint finances that are connected or tied up with somebody else, that can be a bigger thing. Your partner's resources, your partner's finances, if you're married, can become a bigger energy, for better or for worse, depending on what's going on in your eighth house and the transits and activations that year. It could be, involving inheritance, insurance, taxes. Any of those topics and themes can be activated during an eighth house year. From there, we go on to a more light and joyful year, one of the good houses, the house of God in traditional astrology, which is the ninth house, which is activated at age 8, 20, 32, 44, etc., every 12 years from there on out. And this is where your beliefs become central focus, your religion, your value systems, your spirituality become front and center. And you might be deepening your spiritual practice, you might be deepening your understanding or your worldview in some way. This could be an activation of exploration through travel. This could be an activation of higher educational pursuits, higher learning, connecting with new teachers, maybe going back to school or taking a course of some kind. This is a year where you're broadening and expanding your mind at a higher level through different cultural experiences, but also through travel and through connection with different ideologies and belief systems and systems of study that don't necessarily have to be religious. Then the 10th house becomes activated, which is a big career year for a lot of people. And so this is activated at age 9, 21, 33, 45, 57, 69, so on and so forth, every 12 years after that. And so this is where your career becomes central focus. And even if it's not your career, like you're not working when you're 9 years old, it could be where you're thinking about what you want to do when you grow up. You're thinking about your goals and ambitions, how you want the wider world to see you, or the impact you want to make on the wider world or the world at large. After your working years, it can be more focused on your legacy and the impact that you're still making even after you're done working. It can bring up issues with people in positions of power and authority. It can be you as an authority, you as a leader coming into your own in that way. It could have to do with your business if you have one. And so those are the themes that are activated during those years that become more prominent. From there, we go into another happier year, a more social year, which is the 11th house activation. And that happens at age 10, 22, 34, 46, 58, 70, 82, so on and so forth. So that is a year where we're more focused on our tribe, on our social connections, on the people that we surround ourselves with by choice, on our networks and the people that can benefit us, because the 11th house is the house of benefactors and people who support us and lift us up and help us to achieve our bigger goals. And so great year for networking, right? Great year for connections. But if you have a difficult 11th house, there could be a lot of social drama going on. And so the additional layers we're going to get into will help you to understand what this looks like for you personally. And finally, we have the 12th house year, which happens age 11, 23, 35, 47, 59, 71, 83, so on and so forth. And this is a year where things are coming full circle. This is a year where we are releasing a lot. It's a year of endings and letting go. It's a year of undoing, because we are preparing for that big reset of the first house year that's coming up the very next year. And so this solar return year is all about letting go. It's about going inward. There could be themes of solitude, seclusion, isolation, having to reap what we've sown, not just in this lifetime, but in previous and past lifetimes. Cycles that have been ongoing over and over again, not just now, but for decades or for centuries even before we were actually incarnated in this lifetime, could be coming up for review and release. This is also the house of specific institutions. So it could be that you're dealing with hospital systems. It could be that you're dealing with retreat centers or prisons even. It could be that you're dealing with institutions and places that are outside of the normal world where people go to be away from the day-to-day grind. This is the house of sleep and dreams and spirituality through your actual direct connection with other dimensional realities and other realms. And so this can be a very transcendent year and creative year for a lot of people, but it is another one of those bad, malefic, difficult houses. And so often people tend to have more difficulty during 12th house years unless they have something else that's making up for it to create a better balance. And so in addition to looking at the house itself and those general themes that you'll also find again in that free Astrology 101 quick reference guide, so you can go back to that without having to, I mean, you can rewatch this video, I highly recommend it, but you'll have those notes there. But in addition to that, you're also going to want to look at what happened the last time that house was activated. And so for example, if you are in your 12th house year and you are 47 years old, what were the themes, what were the things that came up related to the 12th house themes that were really prominent in your life at age 35, at age 23, at age 11, because these are cycles that are repeating themselves every 12 years, but also building upon each other every single year, where you're getting to the next phase, the next progression, the next iteration of that cycle, where something from that prior activation year is coming back around, but in a new way, because there have been new developments, because you dealt with things during that previous profection year and, in the years thereafter. So you can get a lot of information about what's coming back up for you to work on and work with just by looking at those repeating cycles, just by looking at those previous years when that house was activated. So now let's move on to step 2. So step 1 is that the house is activated. Step 2 is that the sign is activated in that house. And so the themes and connections and energies of that zodiac sign. So for example, if your first house is occupied by Taurus, those Taurus energies and Taurus themes, your Taurus ascendant, your Taurus personality traits are going to become more activated. If your 4th house is occupied by Aries, then during that 4th house year, there are going to be some more fiery, more willful, more ambitious energies and themes around your home, your family, your property. And so looking at those combinations, which you can get through the Astrology 101 guide, and you can start picking apart what they mean, that's going to help you to get another layer of interpretation into that year and that activation. The other thing that you're going to want to do in step 2 is look at if there are any planets that are sitting in that house. So if you have planets in the house that's being activated for that year, those planets and their general significations will also become activated. And so, for example, if you are in your 3rd house year and your 3rd house has the sun in the sign of Gemini, this is going to be a year where you are very social and where you are going to be connecting with your soul's purpose and path through that energy of community, of social connection, of communication, of education, of gossip maybe, of sharing and spreading information, where it's going to be lighting up a big part of the core of who you are and helping you to feel more satisfied and successful through that activation and connection. And so what house is being activated? What sign is in that house, and how does that reflect the energy of the year ahead? And then the planets that are in that sign and house and what that represents for you more personally. Now, I have a whole playlist of videos that talk about every single planet in all of the houses, and you can find that down in the description below. I'm going to put the playlist there. I'll also put it at the end of this video so you can watch it next, so you can see which planets in which house represent different energies, activations, how they operate, because those operations are going to become major life themes. In addition to all of this, and in addition to that house being activated, this is where it starts to get a little bit more complicated. We're going to be getting into what's called house rulerships. So at the start of this video, I went through the planets in traditional astrology that are connected to and rule the different zodiac signs. So now for step 4, for house rulerships, we are going to be determining the Lord of the year, the ruler of your entire year, which is represented by one specific planet. And so the planet that rules the sign in traditional astrology that occupies the house in whole sign houses that is being activated for that year ahead is your planetary ruler, your Lord of that entire year for that solar return year. And so an example of this would be if it is a 5th house profection year and your 5th house is occupied by Cancer, the moon rules the sign of Cancer. Therefore, the moon is the Lord of that year. Another example would be if you are 12 years old and you are in your 1st house profection year and you are a Gemini rising. Mercury is the ruler of Gemini, therefore Mercury is the Lord of the year for that year for age 12 for you. One more example, let's say it's your 10th house profection year and your 10th house is occupied by Pisces. In traditional astrology, Jupiter rules Pisces. Therefore, Jupiter is going to be the Lord of the year for that year. And so whatever the Lord of the year is, the energies of that planet, generally, their general significations, will become a prominent theme to combine with the energy of the house and all the activations within that house to tell you more about what's coming up for your year ahead. And so again, in the Astrology 101 guide, we talk about the different energies of the different planets, so you have that quick reference. But just to run through it again very quickly, the moon is your intuition, it's your emotions, it's your subjective sense of reality, it's the mother, it's very nurturing, it's very receptive. The sun is the soul's expression of purpose and physical reality, so it's your vitality, your life force energy, it's what lights you up very literally. The energy of Mercury is very communicative, it's very cerebral, it's very thought-based, it's very logical. It has to do with your mind and the way your mind works and the way that you communicate and connect and express yourself with others and the way that you learn. When we talk about Venus, that's all about your love language, your relationships, your connections to other people. It's about your values and your self-worth and what brings you pleasure in the material realm. When we talk about Mars, Mars is a traditionally malefic planet. And so while Venus activation years can be more positive and more pleasant because it's a benefic energy, Mars years can be a little bit more challenging. Venus is the energy of bringing things together, whereas Mars is the energy of separation, of cutting cords, literally of cutting of knives. It's accidents, it's injuries, it's arguments, disputes, it's things that are volatile and inflammatory, but it's also ambition and willpower and drive. When we talk about the Jupiter years, those are beneficial years as well. Jupiter is the planet of luck, opportunity, expansion, good fortune. It's the planet of wisdom. It's the planet that brings a lot of things that are considered positive in the material realm. It says yes to things. And so Jupiter years tend to be a little bit happier for most people. Then we have Saturn, which is a malefic planet. And so Saturn is limitation, restriction, isolation, it's challenge. It says no and it brings delays. It tells you, you can't do this right now. You have to do it the right way and not the fast way. It is the teacher that gives us the hard lessons. It's karma. And in traditional astrology, it rules death. It rules fear. And so all of these energies could be coming up during a Saturn year. But the energy of the planet's general significations can be altered by the sect. So whether you're born in a day or a night chart, it can be altered by the condition of that planet when it comes to whether it's in its rulership, exaltation, detriment, or fall. It can be changed by the energy of that planet when it comes to the different aspects it's making. And so to really understand house rulerships and the Lord of the Year, you have to really understand the full spectrum of a holistic chart interpretation using house rulerships. Now, I do have some videos of this on my channel. I will post them down below. But if you really want to understand how to make really nuanced, accurate, like freaky accurate interpretations and predictions using the natal chart and using Annual Profections, you're going to want to check out my house rulerships course. I will post the link for that down in the description below too. That is where you're going to get the full natal story involving these planets. And you know, if you don't really have a full understanding of the natal chart, I highly recommend joining either level 1 of the Cosmic Academy of Astrology, where you're going to get everything you need to make really nuanced natal chart readings, and even a little bit of house rulerships. We do advanced house rulerships in level 3 and in my house rulerships course. But even in the foundational course that I have on astrology, we touch on it because it's just so important. And so that's going to help you really weave this together if you're really serious about getting really in depth with your predictions. But that is step 4. So step 4 is the Lord of the Year, right? We have to look at that planet. We have to look at what it's doing. We have to look at its condition, and that will give you a lot of information of literally the conditions around your year ahead. Is it going to be positive? Is it going to be challenging? Is it going to be kind of neutral or in between? What does that overall experience feel like in the grand scheme of things, in the bigger picture story of your life and the year-to-year experiences that you're having? And this is also where you get a very nuanced, detailed story of what's being activated in very literal, very specific ways. I'm going to give you actually an example of how this all works at the very end of this video with a celebrity birth chart so we can put it all together, and we're almost there. But this is where you get that nuanced story. This is where you get a lot of detail, where Annual Profections can give you such a detailed energy of the year ahead. And it's just so simple to know where to look. And so the next couple of steps that I'm gonna lump in with step 4, which is the Lord of the Year, are going back to the house that's activated. So if you have planets in the house that's being activated for that year, so let's say that you're in your 4th house Profection year and the sun is in your 4th house, the house that's occupied by the sign or signs that's ruled by that planet will also be activated, or the themes will be activated in some way. And so if your sun is in the 4th house and you are a Scorpio rising, which means that Leo occupies your 10th house, when your 4th house Profection year comes, career and career related energies will also become activated because your house of career is ruled by the sun. If that's getting too complicated for you, you don't have to worry about it now. Go back and review, do the basics, maybe jump into some of the resources that I've given you, and then come back to this. The other thing that you should know is that if the Lord of the Year is one of the many planets in traditional astrology that rules over more than one sign, then the other house that's ruled by that sign will also become activated in a secondary way. And so an example of this would be if you are in a 1st house Profection year and you are a Gemini rising, and Mercury is the Lord of the Year. The house that is occupied by Virgo will also become activated for that year ahead. And so that means that your 4th house and your 1st house will both become active. All right, so hopefully you're following so far, because we have one more step and it's a little less complicated than everything I just said the last few minutes. Okay, and so step 5 is an easier one to keep track of, even if you're a beginner, because it's all about transits. And so transits either to the house that's activated, to the planets in that house, to the Lord of the Year in your birth chart, or from the Lord of the Year in your birth chart become more predominant and important. And so if you've ever wondered why in some years Mercury retrogrades are just absolutely hellish, even if they're not as predominant in the way that they're hitting your birth chart, whereas other years they're like not that big of a deal, and maybe Mars transits become a bigger issue, or Venus or Jupiter, this is why. And so if your Lord of the Year is the moon, then the moon's transits on a day-to-day basis are going to become more active, and the full moon and new moon for that year ahead is going to become more important, and the eclipses, oh my goodness, are going to be important. If you are in a Leo year, a solar year where the sun is the Lord of the Year, then the sun's transits are going to be more important. If you're in a Mars-ruled year, Mars will become more important. And so this is really where you're going to start to understand what to focus on when you're looking at transits and trying to make predictions in your transit readings. And even if you're not an astrologer, if you've never gone through my transits course, if you've never gone through the Cosmic Academy of Astrology and you don't intend to, you can understand what's going to be more important just by watching my regular forecasts, you guys. I put these out for free every single month, and especially when the bigger transits are coming, you're going to get that interpretation and you're going to know, hey, I am in a Mercury year, so that Mercury retrograde or that Mercury transit that Heather's talking about, that's going to be more important versus, if you're in a Saturn year and you're like, oh, this is a big Saturn activation that Heather's talking about. I need to pay attention to that because this is going to be a bigger milestone moment for me for this year than some of these other transits over there. So you don't have to understand astrology. You don't have to be advanced to really utilize this information. Just knowing the Lord of the Year and knowing that when you listen to these forecasts, that is what you need to be focusing more on. That's going to be so important and so helpful. And so before we move on to the demonstration, and also I have a couple bonus activations or bonus techniques that we can talk about here. If you have learned something so far, let me know in the comment section below the aha moments, and let me know which year that you're in. So what house is being activated, and what is your Lord of the Year right now? I want to know all about it and what your experience has been. Make sure you like this video, subscribe, and if you're listening on one of the podcast platforms, please leave me a 5-star review and leave me a little comment too, because I like reading them. Before we get into the demonstration portion of this video, I want to mention a couple bonuses that you can use Annual Profections for. And so this is not traditional, but this is something that I have learned through direct experience in working with birth charts and working with predictions and working with thousands of charts from people all over the world using Annual Profections. And that is that this technique can be applied to solar returns as well, which makes sense, right? Because this is all about your solar return year. This is all about your personal year ahead. So it would make sense that, yeah, the solar returns can be activated more so under the lens of Annual Profections. And so when you're looking at your solar return chart, for example, as a standalone chart, the house that is being activated for that year doesn't necessarily apply, but the Lord of the Year is going to be more important to look at in your solar return chart. So for example, if you are in a Mars ruled year, then when you're looking at your solar return chart, Mars might be something you want to focus a little bit more on in addition to your sun, in addition to looking at the overall big picture story. Because the Mars part of that solar return story is going to be a bigger theme throughout the year. And so if you're not familiar with solar return, you essentially read that chart as if it were a story that's being told about the biggest themes and energies for your year ahead. And so we teach that in the same course where I teach Annual Profections, because they work really well together. I teach all of my annual and monthly timing techniques, and we weave them and interrelate them. And we also kind of get into how they work with transits and things like that. And so again, the link is down in the description below. But in addition to that, you want to look at how the solar return chart is activating the natal chart. And again, you're going to want to look at the house that's active for that year and how the solar return chart is activating that house. And you're also going to want to look at the Lord of the Year and how the Lord of the Year is activating your natal chart. And so those are 2 additional bonus ways that you can get additional depth into your year ahead reading. And so let's bring this all together with a chart example. So for those of you who are a little bit more well-versed in astrology, I feel like seeing this in action is going to help you to really understand it. And so the chart that you're seeing up on your screen now is Britney Spears and her birth chart. And so what I think is really fascinating, because I've used her chart as an example in a lot of my courses and in the Cosmic Academy of Astrology. So if you're a student, this might be a little familiar to you. But what was really fascinating for me was looking at all the different layers of activation that were happening at the time that her conservatorship ended in November of 2021. And one of those layers is very prominent with Annual Profections. And so her conservatorship ended when she was technically still 39 years old and in her 4th house Profection year. And so let's just start there. Right? So the 4th house is the house of family. And very literally, she was trying to take back control of her life from her family, from her parents. The 4th house rules the parents. That was a big theme, and that was something that she was successful with for that year. In addition to that, Saturn is the Lord of the Year. Saturn is limitation, it's restriction, it's isolation, it's rules and regulations. And so she was in a legal battle to take back control of being able to just have rulership over her own life, to not have all these rules, regulations, restrictions imposed on her from her family, from her parents. And for her, she has Saturn exalted in the sign of Libra. And so that was in her 1st house. And so it's not as bad of an energy to have that activation as it would be for other people, because Saturn is in a sign where it is being helped by the energy of that sign. And in the 1st house, it's very literally rules, limitations, restrictions that were being imposed upon her, that were up for debate, up for review, and that were finally released during that year. And then when we get into the layer of transits, this becomes even more fascinating. And so when we're looking at transits with annual profections, I have noted that we actually can look at the outer planets. It's really just the Lord of the Year and house rulerships, not just in annual profections, but in general, where we really need to just stick with the traditional planets because it just doesn't work very well because the modern planets don't actually rule over the signs that they're connected with. It's more of an affinity. That's its own situation and its own spiel. Maybe I'll make a separate video about that. But when we're looking at the transits that were going on for her that year, the major activations and transits, for that entire year, Pluto was transiting her natal Venus in the 4th house. So remember, her 4th house is activated, and therefore the planets in the 4th house are also activated. She has Venus conjunct the South Node, which has karmic implications in her 4th house. And this is about money and relationships and connections with other people and material things. And that's very much a Venus thing. And then we have Pluto, which is power and control and massive changes. I've seen so many extremes that occur during Pluto transits where you're on one end of the spectrum and then all of a sudden you're on the other. And for her, there was a very extreme change in who has power and control over her, a very extreme change in her relationship with her family at that time. And so I thought that was fascinating. Pluto's also coming off of a square to her natal Saturn, which is the Lord of the Year, during this year, during this time frame. And so that I thought was really fascinating. And so she has this big activation of this 4th house energy that's very literal. It's very transformative, right? It's very Plutonian. It's very much about power and control that's happening during this 4th house profection year, around the time that her conservatorship is going through this legal battle and at the time that it ended on November 12th of 2021. Around that time, she also had Saturn, transiting Saturn, hitting her moon. Her moon is very literally her emotions. It's very literally her relationship with her mother. It's her home. It's all of these things, but it's also the ruler of her 10th house of career and public reputation. And that was something that was very much under scrutiny. That was something that was very affected by this entire battle and the Free Britney movement. And so that is something that is being activated throughout this time period, throughout this year as well. And so you can see very literally there are major themes bubbling up in the transits that are being strengthened and amplified by the 4th house profection year, by Saturn being the Lord of the Year. So I love this as an example. Hopefully this helped you weave it all together, bring it all together, and see how annual profections work in action. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like the video, subscribe to my channel, share this video with a friend who you think could benefit from the information that I shared with you today. Leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform, and watch this video floating up here next because you're probably gonna love it if you liked this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.